Okay, so we're going to move into using some technology to do this work because you probably noticed doing scatter plots by hand can be fairly long and tedious, especially if there's a lot of data. So we're going to use technology in the form of Microsoft Excel. There's other softwares out there, but that's the one we have access to. And I just like to point out that Office 365, the online version, doesn't have all of these features, so you may have to actually download and install Excel or Office 365 on a home computer to have access to all of this. But I'd like to show you how this works because it can be very valuable in terms of time saving, reports, and other classes. So key terms for Excel: rows, just so we're clear, are horizontal; columns are vertical. A trend line, that's a big one. Okay, so trend line is what Microsoft calls a line of best fit. Okay, and this R squared value is something we're going to look at. You don't have to know how it's generated. We just have to know for now that it's a statistical grade of how good your line or curve of best fit matches your data. So if you have a value of 1, it's kind of like getting a grade. Okay, so a 0.8 is kind of okay. A 0.9 is much better. And a 1.0 is amazing. Okay, so as you get closer to 1, that means your relationship, whether it be a line or a curve, is becoming more exact. It matches your data better. So this is our target. We're trying to get a 1 with this R squared value, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. Okay, so we have a little bit of data here. It's a number of push-ups a person could do in a week. So they start off week 1, week 2, week 3, etc. The number of push-ups they do increases. So what we would do is we would enter this information into Excel, and I'll go through that with you in a second. We're going to try and find a line of best fit, also called a trend line, also called linear regression. We're going to apply that to the data when it's on our graph, and then we're going to try and make a decision which one fits it best. Okay, so I put the data into Excel. This is what it would look like. Okay, I'm going to do all of this for you in 2 seconds. Oops. Once the data's in, okay, we would enter. I'm just going to bring this back right here. Let's bring that up so I can scroll. Okay, I would then, okay, so independent variable goes in the first column. Okay, you can change them later, but it's much easier if you just put your independent, that's your X value, in the first column. You put your Y value in the second column. Okay, so independent, first column. Dependent variable, second column. Hold or left click the mouse and highlight the 2 columns, so you should end up with everything highlighted. So if we were to look on here, you would end up with all of this information highlighted just like that. It doesn't matter if you include the weeks and number of push-ups, it'll figure out what information it's going to work with. Then we're going to move to something called insert on the top, okay, and choose charts scatter. So if you scroll up here, insert is a menu item right here. Okay, and when you click on insert, you'll get this guy right here, charts. Okay, we're going to then move to something called scatter. That's our goal. Okay, and then once we have that, you'll see Microsoft is pretty quick. It'll draw the picture for us. It'll make it in lightning time. It sets up the axes, it plots all the points, does everything for you really fast. Okay, and that's one of the reasons that we want to try this, because you can increase your speed and significantly over doing any of this by hand. Okay, so the graph will be created immediately. Depending on the message you're trying to send, and I'll show you what this looks like in a minute, you can change the appearance of this by playing with the format or the scale that you present your data on, and you can really sway your audience. That's a really big thing to understand with statistical presentation. To insert a trend line, so now this is the key term for Microsoft. So I couldn't screen capture this, so I'm going to highlight this. When you click on your data, all of the data points will be highlighted. While they're highlighted, okay, so while they are highlighted, you then right click on them and you should get this menu right here. Okay, and the thing we're looking for is add trend line. Once you do an add trend line, This menu will pop up on the side. You want to make sure you turn on the display equation on the chart and display the r-squared value. And then here's the different types of trend lines and regressions you get to play with. There's exponential, linear, logarithmic. Polynomial is just like whether you would have an x squared, an x cubed. You can click on the value over here and just change it and see what happens. Power, moving average, we probably wouldn't do moving average, but you can try any of the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 just for playing around to see what happens. And then it should display the equation and that r-squared value right on the chart. Okay, so I'm going to just jump over to Microsoft for a second. So here's my Excel. I have everything highlighted. So I'm just going to jump over to Insert. I'm going to find Charts, and I'm going to say Scatter. Okay, and there it is. Okay, now the titles and things you can play with, I'm not going to go into how you do all that, but just understand that within Excel, if you click on different things, okay, and then right click on, you will get a whole bunch of opportunities to change the information. Okay, be that the axes, be that the grid, be that the chart title, whatever it is, you can click on it, you'll get more options, especially if you right click after you've highlighted. So we are going to highlight the data. So I'm going to left click on it, and you'll notice all of the data points are now highlighted. And here's the key. And there's probably other ways of doing this, but I always do it this way. I then right click while I'm on that data point. I should see add trend line. I get my trend line here to show up. I want to make sure, I'm going to slide this up so we can see it. I want to make sure I display equation and display r-squared value. So now what we want to try and watch, maybe I can zoom in a bit more to make this a little easier to see. 200, will that work? Let's say 200. Ooh, that's quite large. Let's jump over here. So what I want you to see is this r-squared value. Okay, so right now I am on linear and I am getting a r-squared value of 0.78. So think of that like 78%. So now if I switch to exponential, look at that. It changed to a curve of best fit. It gave me a new equation, which you're not responsible for, at least in this grade. But look at the r-squared value. It's now 0.9901. That's a score of 99%. Okay, you could try logarithmic. Nope, drop down to 55%, so that's no good. Polynomial, I'm at 94, but that's with an order 2. I could move that up to order 3, order 4, order 5. That's not bad. Look at that, 0.997. Okay, and that's what the r-squared value is for. Now, granted, you'll get an insane equation. Okay, for this one, so look at x to the 5th, 4th, 3rd. This is a pretty crazy equation. Okay, and that's the power of the technology. It does that for you. Let's just jump back to exponential for a minute. You'll see it's not a bad equation. It's a little bit smaller, and I get 0.99, which is 99%. I'm pretty happy with that. And that's all there is to it to put in a line of best fit or a trend line on a graph. So if you have to do this in science or other classes, even math class, you should be plotting lines or data using Excel because it is so much faster and it's easy to manipulate once it's all in there. Okay, let's jump back to our homework. So my only homework I had for you was to revisit the 2 equations or questions we did from our first lesson on scatter plots and try them in Excel. So take the data you have here, okay, and I've included the values we got from doing them by hand. So just take this information here, plunk it into Excel, and see what the output would be from an equation standpoint for the trend line or the line of best fit that Excel outputs. You should see they're pretty close. This one in particular, I'm going to just remind you about that crazy y-intercept. Okay, not all, just because we drew the line here, this doesn't mean this is a y-intercept. So just keep that in mind as you look at it. So that's it. Take those 2 sets of data, plunk them into Excel, see what they output for their lines of best fit and their equations, and that's it.